WeWork is a company that needs no introduction. Its modern communal office spaces completely disrupted how people think about workspaces. And at one point, it was one of the most highly valued startups of all time. That is, until their valuation plummeted by $40 billion in a matter of weeks. This is the story of WeWork and its meteoric rise and fall. If you're interested in seeing more videos like this, be sure to smash the like and subscribe buttons. The story of WeWork begins with its co-founders Adam and Miguel. Adam Newman was born in Israel in 1979. His parents, both doctors, got divorced when he was 7 years old. And as a result, he ended up living in 13 different cities over the next 15 years. Adam spent a number of years living in a kibbutz, which was a communal-style living in Israel. Although he was a smart child, Adam was severely dyslexic and couldn't read or write till 3rd grade. After graduating from school, Adam joined an elite unit of the Israeli Navy, where he served as an officer for 5 years. He then moved to New York City, where he started his first company selling collapsible heels for women, an idea he had after watching his sister switch out of her heels into flats time and again. Although this company did not succeed, Adam was not deterred. He started another company called Crawlers shortly after, which sold baby clothes with knee pads in them. The idea was to allow babies to crawl around without hurting their knees. His company grew for a while, generating a few $1 million in revenue, but was eventually unable to make a profit and failed. Apparently, people actually cared about profits back then. Meet Miguel McKelvey, the other co-founder of WeWork. Miguel was raised by a single mother and grew up in a hippie commune in Oregon. Adam and Miguel's shared background in communal-style living likely inspired them to the idea of communal-style working. Miguel went to Colorado College for a few years before transferring to the University of Oregon, where he pursued an architecture degree. After graduating, Miguel moved to Tokyo, where he founded his first company, English Baby, a company that still exists today. The idea behind English Baby was to help foreign students learn English through pen pals in other countries. Their tagline was, and still is, "Learn English, find friends, it's cool." Soon after, Miguel moved to New York to pursue his architecture career, where he joined a small architecture firm in Dumbo and worked on a contract to build American apparel retail stores across the country. Adam and Miguel had a lot in common. They were both very tall, grew up in communes, and had entrepreneurial backgrounds. But most importantly, they were both in New York in 2008, where they met at a common friend's party. At the time, Adam was looking for office space for his company Crawlers. Miguel convinced him to move to Dumbo instead of Manhattan, and Adam ended up moving to the same building as Miguel's architecture firm. This was in 2008, right in the heart of the financial crisis. Rent was cheap and landlords were having a hard time finding tenants. Miguel and Adam, who were now friends, realized that the building had a lot of empty floors. Seeing an opportunity, they convinced the landlord of their building to let them take over one of the floors, which they then converted into an office space and rented out to people through Craigslist. They called themselves Green Desk and positioned it as an eco-friendly company that only used recycled desks and was powered entirely by wind energy, a claim that was likely false, but nonetheless appealed to new age entrepreneurs who needed office space but couldn't afford to rent entire offices. Green Desk was essentially like a prototype for WeWork. It appealed to new founders and small companies because it allowed them to rent parts of an office instead of the entire office, and also had an environmentally friendly, cool coffee shop vibe. And it worked very well. So well, in fact, that they soon expanded to more floors in the building, and eventually to nearby buildings owned by the landlord. Eventually, the landlord offered to buy Green Desk from Adam and Miguel for $3 million, which they happily accepted. But Adam and Miguel weren't done there. Although they had sold the existing business, they knew that this idea still had a lot more potential. So they came up with the name WeWork and decided to take it over to Manhattan. Adam and Miguel wanted to go even bigger this time, so they began looking into leasing a whole building in downtown Manhattan. But they needed a lot more money to get a long-term lease in Soho. So when they met Joel Schreiber, a property developer from Brooklyn, at a real estate auction, they asked him to invest in their business. Joel liked Adam's energy and decided to invest $15 million for a third of the company, giving WeWork a $45 million valuation before it even existed. This was a huge investment for a seed round, but as an investment in real estate, it felt a lot safer than a typical seed investment because of the intrinsic value of the property lease. So Adam and Miguel began renovating the building and achieved 100% occupancy before they had even finished renovating. As WeWork grew, word of the company spread to Wall Street pretty quickly. In 2012, they raised $17 million from Benchmark Capital at a valuation of $97 million. Over the next few years, WeWork expanded its business aggressively to Seattle and San Francisco, which were buzzing with startups. They quickly received more funding from investment banks like JP Morgan, Jefferies, and Goldman Sachs. And by 2014, they were valued at $1.5 billion, achieving unicorn status in just 4 years. These incredible valuations were due to several factors. Every building required a long-term lease and a complete renovation, making it extremely capital-intensive. Investors didn't mind the steep valuations. Real estate just seemed safe because there was always some intrinsic value in the leases. Finally, WeWork also positioned itself more like a tech company than a real estate company, juicing up their valuation even more. Speaking of which, a simple like from you can really help juice up our channel. In 2016, WeWork raised another $700 million at a valuation of almost $17 billion, making them one of the most valuable startups in the world alongside Uber and Airbnb. At this point, they had hundreds of buildings around the world and were expanded aggressively. Enter Softbank. Remember the guy who made one of the greatest VC investments ever into Alibaba? Masayoshi Son? Yep, that guy. Well, it turns out that his company Softbank was looking to deploy part of its $100 billion vision fund into disruptive companies. WeWork seemed like a perfect investment candidate for them. They were one of the most highest valued startups in the world and required large amounts of capital to scale effectively, due to the capital-intensive nature of the business. If WeWork's valuations were inflated before, they got a whole lot more inflated when Softbank entered the picture. Masa lives by the go big or go home philosophy. He told the eccentric WeWork founders that they were not nearly crazy enough and that they needed to think 10 times bigger. And so, Softbank invested $4.4 billion into WeWork in 2017. Shortly after, Masa even considered investing another $16 billion into the company, but their investors vetoed that decision. Up until this point, it seemed like things were going great for WeWork. But in 2019, WeWork filed its S-1 to go public, and shit started to hit the fan very quickly. The public was shocked to realize that WeWork was losing a lot of money and was also being catastrophically mismanaged. One notable incident of this mismanagement was that Adam bought the trademark to the name The We Company and sold it to his own company, pocketing several million dollars. More stories of Adam's eccentric behavior also started appearing in publications. Adam lived an extremely lavish lifestyle, but because most of his wealth was paper wealth, he used loans backed by his WeWork shares in order to live his luxurious lifestyle, which included chartering private jets and $90 million worth of residential properties for himself. He also frequently walked around the streets of Manhattan barefoot and frequently plowed employees with tequila shots and beer. Adam's eccentricity extended to his professional behavior as well, with employees reporting that he frequently scheduled meetings after midnight, showing up late or not at all, and occasionally drunk. He also bought properties with his personal money and leased them out to his own company, which is a very shady move for a CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. The company culture was also splashed with doses of Adam's high life. For example, they had giant company retreats with 8,000 WeWork employees and their families enjoying performances by Lorde, beatboxing workshops, and enough booze to run a frat for a decade, which sounds fun, until you realized that company was bleeding money and couldn't afford such extravagance. Once the public markets realized the debacle that was WeWork, WeWork got lots of negative press and came under serious scrutiny, leading them to withdraw their filing for IPO. It also led to their valuation plummeting from $48 billion to just $8 billion, leaving a lot of employee stock options underwater. WeWork is still operating, propped up with more emergency money from Softbank. But their story is no longer the story of a massively successful unicorn, but rather a cautionary tale of eccentric founders flying too close to the sun and getting burned because of a lack of supervision. Let us know what you think about this in the comments below, and drop us a like and subscribe if you made it this far.